Well, good night, Guyana. Good night, Guyanese around the world, and those who are viewing from wherever you are, whether you're home in your living room, or you're home in your kitchen, or you're home in your living room. I'm hoping that you're all safe and away from this virus. Welcome to this program, as we do every Wednesday, coming to you live from New York City, with the compliments of Nohar Singh and Globespan and his team. I'm of course, in Florida, and my guests are in Guyana and DC and other parts. So tonight, of course, we want to. It's a sad day for many who are part of the unions in Guyana. A very famous Guyanese trade unionist, head of GAU for many years, and someone who has fought for the rights of workers for many decades. Also a parliamentarian, a senior executive member of the PPP. He passed away today, Komal Chand. And I think, out of respect, I think Devin has a video to profile Mr. Komal Chand. Let's go to that video, Devin.
A veteran trade unionist and president of the Guyana Agricultural Workers Union, Mr. Komal Chand is also a mechanic by trade and a farmer on the west bank of the Marara. Komal Chand has been a PPPC Member of Parliament since 1992. In the 10th Parliament, he has responsibility for Region Number 3, Essequibo Island, West Demerara. Mr. Chan has served as President of the GAU and is also a Member of Parliament for the People's Progressive Party Civic, shadowing agriculture. Mr. Chan started in GAU as an organizing secretary and moved through the ranks to General Secretary and eventually President.
Well, there you have it, a small little tribute to a significant soul who passed away today in Guyana, Komal Chand. We extend our condolences to his family, to his colleagues in the PPP, and of course his colleagues in the trade unionist movement. With that, I want to move to our show tonight. Our guest tonight is no stranger to us. I think this is the first time one of our guests is going to be on, but Mr. Lennox Schumann, presidential candidate for the Liberty and Justice Party, who's been an advocate before election and of course after the election for democracy and the maintenance of the highest rule of law, the Constitution, which is of course unfolding daily in our lives, and it's becoming nauseating. Notwithstanding, the onslaught of COVID. We also have tonight, I think, the first time on our panel on this program, Mr. Dr. Paul Nehru Tennessee, who is the director of the Reimann Institute, and of course, he will tell us a bit about what that institute does and its mandate and how it will impact Guyana in years to come. He has a very long, very productive, very many accomplishments, which it may take me maybe 10-15 minutes to read. But we do have a short video that will do a little justice to Mr. Tennessee. So Devin, if you could play that intro video about our esteemed guest, Mr. Tennessee, Dr. Tennessee.
Nehru Tennessee is a bilingual director of the Reimann Institute. He teaches at the University of the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. He holds a diploma in social studies, Oxford University, B.A. York University, Canada, M.A. History, Central University of Venezuela, and an M.A. in Government, the Johns Hopkins University, USA. He authored 2 peer-reviewed books. As director of the Reimann Institute, he co-conducted listening interviews in 5 regions of Guyana and authored Listening Interview Series Number 1, which was presented at Carol Lodge, Georgetown, Guyana. He was in the Director of International Affairs at the University of the District of Columbia, Director of International Affairs at the National Alliance, of Postal Federal Employees, USA. He also served as Director of World Confederation of Labor, Washington Liaison Office, and the WCL Permanent Representative at the United Nations. He is a host producer of Carib Nation TV program and completed over 200 shows aired across the world. Tennessee was the Democratic Labor Movement presidential candidate in 1985 and 1992. He is the recipient of an award Restorer of Democracy from the Y50 Anniversary Committee, New York. Recipient of the Pinnacle Award from National Coalition on Caribbean Affairs. In 2019, he received an award, Accomplishment in Service, from the College of Arts and Sciences, University of the District of Columbia. He is a life member of the Oxford Union.
Well, there you have it, Senor Paul Tennessee. Senor Paul Tennessee, buenos noches.
Muy bien.
I know you're billing. I know you've written books in Spanish. You've lectured in Spanish. So we're so glad to have you here tonight. I know I personally have had encounters with you as a young man when I finished university and went to Guyana. I used to go to your office, myself and other political activists used to go. We were inspired by you used to wear a beret then, I believe. And you had a very strong revolutionary sort of voice and tone and demeanor. That was cool for me as a young 21-year-old. That was inspiring to me. So I'm glad that I'm able to, after so many years, to see you still in the fight for democracy. But before we get into all that democracy talk and so on, I want to ask you, Mr. Tennessee, Dr. Tennessee, how are you coping with the coronavirus? I know of lately the US, I don't know you in Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. has just been earmarked as one of those hotspots to be.
Well, I just want to say two quick things. One is I have a strong history in the labor movement, and I gave leadership in Guyana, the Caribbean, and Latin America, and at the world level. So I knew Komal very well and very personally, and the leadership of GAU, and I have the highest regard for him, and I'm very pained that he passed away. He's another legend in the labor movement. I also am happy that I'm here with Schumann. I've been interacting with him for the last 3 or 4 years, and he definitely has taken on the baton to fight in Guyana from not only myself, but all the others who preceded people like me, who are fearless and want to fight for a Guyana for all Guyanese. Now, in terms of the COVID, as a professor at the university, I have been forced. They say necessity is the mother of invention. I never taught through the internet, and so now I'm teaching 3 courses from my bedroom. And it's not easy. I'm working longer hours. I have to give more attention to students. And many of them have varying resources. Not all of them have access to computers and this and that. So it's quite a challenge. But until now, in the 3 courses I'm teaching, it has been very successful. Today has been extremely interesting. We have 2 sets of students that I've coached to represent Barbados and Bahamas in the Organization of American States simulation with 17 universities across the Americas. We have never done it before through the computers and so forth, virtually. So it's an experiment for those who organize it and for my students. And today I was very proud to see how they were promoting their resolutions on the environment, on gender equality, and a number of other issues on democracy, strongly on democracy. I saw students debating between Venezuela and Colombia and so forth about the need for democracy. So after the COVID virus, or even not even after, during and after, nothing will be the same again. And all of us will have to be re-engineering ourselves and remaking ourselves to survive and go forward in the future.
Absolutely. I think coronavirus certainly has changed how we do things. and will change how we will get things done in the future. I know, Mr. Schumann, you've been active on the ground distributing masks, making masks, and so on. Tell us a bit about what you've been doing and what's the status of the coronavirus environment in Guyana and mechanism that's being used to protect Guyanese. I know you, as a leader, do have a deep interest in ensuring Guyanese are protected and safe from this very dangerous pandemic.
Well, good evening, Salim. Paul, it's good to see you again. I felt kind of a little bit upset at Paul's video because it doesn't really state the part where he was imprisoned for a week in someone's basement, but I'll leave that for Paul to tell. But that being said, it's definitely a big loss for the country and for all of the labor movements in Guyana to have to know of the passing of Mr. Komal. I've never known him personally. I've only met him here and there. And I think just from what I would have read is that he did a fantastic job at representing the workers of Guyana, much like Paul would have done. That being said, I'm happy to see that both of you are safe and that you're healthy and still with us. There's no dry cough. And the interesting thing right now is that even if you have a little bit of an allergy and you sneeze, people tend to look at you like you're terminally ill. Or if you have a cough, let's say something gets stuck in my throat and I have to cough it out, people tend to think that you're ill, right? Right. So it's nothing like that on this side. But that being said, Salim, one of the things that has disturbed us quite a bit in Guyana is the process that is engaged or involved in trying to get people tested. There seems to be a lack in, or a great degree of discontinuity in diagnosing patients and getting them to treatment. I'm not sure if it has been corrected, so I can only speak on information that was available yesterday, is that in order to get tested, if I showed signs or symptoms of having the COVID-19, my doctor would have to go and ask Ms. Vala Lawrence for permission to test me. And after that test is completed, the test goes to Ms. Lawrence rather than going to the doctor. So the point of interception, like to intercept this disease in Guyana in itself, or this virus in itself, there is so much lag that exists that we really can't have real-time data as to what is happening on the ground. Take for example, today they said we have 33 cases, of which one passed away, so we're up to 6 persons who would have died from COVID-19 right now. But there has been no attempt to track and trace, like the epidemiology of it in Guyana is non-existent. And I think to a great extent also the information sharing is lacking. And all of these things, it just points to the fact that we have never had critical crisis management in Guyana. When you think of it, we are a very, very reactionary state. There has been no planning, I don't even think in any capacity, done under this administration, not only for the economy, but also for elections, for a whole host of things. And those things are starting to come back and bite us as a country right now. And I say that because coupled with the pandemic that we have in our borders right now, we have an electoral process that has still left the electorate in purgatory, if I were to put it that way.
Well, I want to get to that a bit later, but I want to ask you.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but I want to say, right, the very fact that some of these things exist, right, we are starting to see where there has been zero planning. Critical crisis management is not something that happens and then you react to it. That's a very reactionary system. What we need in Guyana is a proactive system. Aside from the fact that we have COVID-19 in our borders right now, we have not even started to analyze or started to compile data or started to set in place systems to deal with the impending emotional and mental health issue that will hit Guyana. Those are all impacts that we have not even gotten to as yet. The fact that we are not permitting the private medical institutions the latitude to be able to treat the people in Guyana, it is very, very disturbing. Obviously, if you have everyone going to the GPHC When the place gets overcrowded and you do not permit people who have the symptoms to get tested, what you're doing is taking the legs out from under this country in order to combat this disease. The only way to combat this disease is aggressive information sharing, ensure that the epidemiology is sound, and ensure that all the population in itself are given that opportunity. I mean, you ask about sharing out masks and stuff. There is a multi-stakeholder task force that was set up by the leader, by the presidential candidate of the PPP, along with a variety of parties and a variety of organizations that came together and said, look, the government is not responding the way it should. So what we are going to do is to create a response team. We are going to start sourcing material, sourcing funding, sourcing whatever we can, and ensure that we communicate with these people on the ground firsthand. And that is what we've been engaged in. We have people who are sewing face masks. I mean, it does not provide 100% protection, but at least it is better than nothing on the ground. And that is what we've been trying to do. In some cases, we are encountering where the police services, for example, are being told that they have to go and buy their own equipment, buy their own masks. Fire services, medical staff. You go into Woodlands Hospital, for example, and I can't say that I could testify to this firsthand, but I've heard reports that when they go in there, the hospital is charging them $500 for a mask, and if you don't have a mask, you can't enter. So there are businesses that are obviously crossing a bit of a moral and ethical line in this fight against COVID-19. But that being said, the task force in itself is trying to do as much as we possibly can on the ground, and it is spread across all 10 regions of Guyana.
Why do you believe, Mr. Schumann, that there's been such pause in the way the current administration is dealing with this pandemic? I know you've been very critical of them on so many other things, but is the current administration not taking into consideration the medical personnel and their advice and you know, so that it's not a political response to a medical issue? It's a medical response to a medical issue. Where are our doctors and where are the medical leaders in Guyana?
Salim, well, you hit the nail right on the head there, right? You are politicizing a pandemic. You're not taking the nation's health in what I'd say with good responsibility in this sense. What has happened is that you have an administration, first and foremost, that is not recognized by the international community, attempting to manage a pandemic that they have not prepared for. They have not set aside anything. They don't have the ability to table a budget. So thus the country does not have the kind of finances to be able to address this. Mm-hmm. My understanding is that it has undermined the CMO, the Chief Medical Officer. Take, for example, the Chief Medical Officer is being cut out of the picture and is going to the Deputy Chief Medical Officer and then to the so-called caretaker minister. So they're not empowering the people who have the expertise to address the issues on the ground. My understanding is that yesterday the medical practitioners wrote a letter of complaint, and they're attempting to correct it. But as a country right now, I think that there are some things that we have been terrible students of history on, and I think Professor Tennessee will shed some light on some of these things. But we've been terrible students on looking back at history and how we have not managed things. If you look at what happened in 2005 with the massive flood, it was a very reactive response to what happened. Everything in Guyana comes by way of reaction compared to being proactive. Mm-hmm. And I think that is impeding the country's ability to cope with the pandemic. It is going to continuously impede our ability to cope with the impending economic crisis and the emotional crisis. And we could get into the politics of it later. Absolutely. But I would say that we are in a very difficult situation in Guyana right now.
Yeah, double whammy, of course. Dr. Tennessee, I want to bring you in this. You have a lot of international experience and in country dealing with war, country dealing with all sorts of major issues that creates upheaval in the lives and livelihood of people. How should a government be approaching a pandemic like COVID? And from your exposure to what's happening in Guyana, where do you believe are some of the areas that needs to be fixed or upgraded?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that the chickens are going to come home to roost if the group that is governing Guyana continue to behave as if they're working in a state of ignorance and uncaring. They need to set up a war room. This is a war. Even the President of the United States, the most powerful country on earth, has declared a war. It's a state of mind. Something is wrong with the leadership of Guyana. Their state of mind is in the elections and how to manipulate it. They are busy running GCOM and sending police to GCOM to implement. They are not focused. This is a serious matter. You have to be there 24 hours as a leadership of your country, concerned about your people. This is a criminal activity is being carried out the way they're doing it. It's incredible. And I cannot understand how the minister, who has no qualification to manage a crisis, the key to any management right now and even before and after are three words: cooperation, coordination, and coherence. There has to be somebody in that government that is going to be in charge of those three, especially a poor country like Guyana. Guyana does not has very limited resources, both human and capital resources and technological resources. And therefore, you have to maximize cooperation, coordination, and coherence. As Schumann said, crisis management. You have to have some ability that this situation requires special attention. I would have liked to see some of our top military and police officers combined with our medical officers, as they're doing in the United States. Each day in China, they're doing the same thing. In Cuba, they're doing the same thing. What is happening with Guyana? They are so obsessed in holding on to political office that they don't care if all the people die there. And as I said, the chickens will come home to roost. These people are going to be burnt. You know, my uncle used to run the psychiatric hospital in Berbice. His name was Dr. Ned Paul. And in those years, they used to use some very primitive methods of dealing with mental health, like putting electricity on people. But I think that government of Guyana needs some electricity because something is wrong with those people. Not only about the elections, but something like this. You are telling me that the minister decides if Guyanese live or die? And the bureaucracy, a man just died. He was on the hotline. They never responded to him. Who is responsible for his death? Now, the buck has to stop somewhere. Who is responsible for his death? Who has come out publicly and empathized and visited that family and begged forgiveness for that man's life? Now, this is going to be multiplied in Guyana. It's going to be multiplied.
Absolutely. And I know.
Salim, let me jump in there quick sec, right?
I just want to get this. I know in the U.S. every day, every state and the federal government headed by Donald Trump addresses the media and is confronted with all the difficult questions. You know, running a war room is not going to be an easy task, but it has to be done. And I'm not seeing that level of urgency in Guyana, where the minister or the government or the leader of the government is coming out and say we've had X amount of issues and these are what we.
They lack empathy. These people lack empathy. They don't have empathy with the Guyanese people. They believe they could do anything with the Guyanese people. They could abuse them. So, these people went and voted in elections, and it's nearly over a year now. And now they come up with an issue that they're going to extend it for 5 more years. and introduce a new subject in Guyana. It's called the politics of pandemics.
So Schumann, you want to get into this, but before you get to that, I want you to
before you jump into
the issue.
Before you jump into that, I want to touch this point, Salim, because I think it is obviously glossed over many times, right? There is a significant absence in the indigenous component in any strategy that Guyana is tabling right now, if there is even one. Take, for example, there are two communities that are border communities. That is Kaikan and Purima, both on the Venezuela border. The Guyana Civil Aviation Authority issued a directive that they are discontinuing and prohibiting flights to those border towns. But yet there has been no one stepping up to the plate and asking for an exemption or for permission to operate into those communities, even if it's once a week for restocking flights. But that being said, the fact that we are seeing what's happening in Guyana, it further highlights the importance of lands to indigenous peoples. And I don't want to make this a huge issue, but it needs to be highlighted, right? In Georgetown, for example, people are still populating the market here and there. They're still buying, they're still shopping. But indigenous peoples now, during this pandemic, are going into their farms. They're going to go and fish. They're going to go and hunt. So when people start to talk about the rights of indigenous peoples in a wider context, it shows how much more important it becomes, especially in such crises as these. It is the supermarket for indigenous peoples when you look at what happens down there. The ministry, the government in itself, has nothing, and I say nothing, absolutely zero, in terms of how they intend on addressing indigenous communities. I had a discussion with someone from the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs. They said, well, we submitted a budget to the Ministry of Finance for $30 million. But of course, you're submitting money to the Ministry of Finance that is incapable of tabling a budget to get money that is not there. And that is what I'm talking about, a reactionary system.
Absolutely.
They have not been proactive enough. There should have been literally what I'd say an emergency fund per se, that the country would be in a position to tap into in such circumstances, but none of those things have happened.
Let me make a point here. Today, I read on my Facebook, a person working in the government said that money is not available in the consolidated fund, that they only have money for the ministers, and that from next month, civil servants, public servants may not even get their pay. Now, I want to make a point. The Minister of Finance said that he's looking for resources, and he applied to the World Bank, and the World Bank said they are studying it. He said that he's going to approach PAHO and WHO. President Trump said yesterday that he plans to cut the budget of WHO, which is cutting the budget of PAHO. So where these people do not understand, I don't know what's wrong with them mentally, that the entire Western world consider the government of Guyana currently as illegitimate. They are not going to give them any money. They are putting the Guyanese people on an altar and they are sacrificing them because they are so obsessed with stealing an election for a few of them. That is what is the problem.
Salim,
that is the reality.
Salim, there's one.
COVID or no COVID, unless Guyanese decide to confront these few people, they are not all the Guyanese, you know. It's a small group of people. It's a small group of people. And the only way they're behaving like that is because they believe that the military is predominantly Afro-Guyanese and the police is predominantly Afro-Guyanese, so they could get away with murder. But I don't know if they intend to confront the entire Western world. I wish them all the luck.
What Professor Tennessee stated there, I mean, Mr. Jordan himself came out and said that to the media, but I'm no diplomat. And I think the diplomatic way of saying no is to say we are studying it.
Exactly.
They're not going to come right out and say, look, you know what, we are not going to give you any money because we see you as illegitimate. They're going to say we are going to study it. And then when they get back, we have not had time to consider it yet. It is just a diplomatic way of telling Guyana to bugger off, or telling Mr. Jordan to bugger off. And the fact, if you look at what the headline on the Chronicle said today, is that cabinet had determined that they are not going to take a pay cut because they have families. Well, there's an interesting thing because Parliament was dissolved. The Constitution says that when Parliament is dissolved, cabinet is dissolved. That means literally that there is no parliamentarian and no cabinet. So how now are they convening a cabinet to discuss anything? It just shows a blatant disregard for the rule of law, for the Constitution, for everything.
It's a coup. It's a dictatorship. This has been going on since the no confidence motion. It is a dictatorship. You have to call a spade a spade. A small group of people have seized power in Guyana, and they are trying to prolong it by manipulating the results of the last elections.
Guys,
these people have got to be confronted. And I don't understand Mr. Granger. I met him about 2 times, but the man has written about geopolitics. Mr. Granger taught at the military school here. He should know about geopolitics, and he is placing Guyana now in the same boat of Venezuela. I can't understand that.
So it doesn't make sense. I think what our viewer is seeing is glimpse of Mr. Tennessee when he was taking on the former dictatorship, in the 80s.
And obviously only a part of him too, right?
That's what I'm saying. So if you could fix your camera, Mr. Tennessee, I think you're off-centered. But I want to get back. We have spoken a lot about COVID, and that was not our subject tonight. We haven't spoken yet about about a stimulus package for the economy of Guyana, for the businesses who are losing, for the poor and needy who are jobless right now. Almost 40% of Guyanese were already jobless, so probably another 40% is added to that. So you have 80% joblessness because of this COVID pandemic, and of course, there's got to be some sort of response to this. We're not here to discuss that. I'm just putting it out there. But today's news was very interesting, and it was like surreal almost. Kind of. Is this even real? Am I even reading something correct? Are the numbers correct? The Lowenfield came up with some draft plan about taking 148 days to decide on
56. 156.
148 days to come up with a plan to count. The count will take 156 days. So I want you guys' reaction to that. We've already lost about 7 weeks of a government. Whoever wins. But we don't have a government. And now we're talking about another year of counting 2,000 boxes, 2,000 plus boxes. What is your reaction to this?
Very startling numbers? Because Schumann is on the ground. But let me make 2 points. Number one is that they are using, if you read the statement put out, they're using pandemics as the excuse. As a political scientist, I have never ever read in any liberal democracy that they take so many months to count the votes that have already been counted, to recount the votes. Even in India, you get the results with 1.2 billion people faster than that. Guyana only has less than 500,000 people. So that's a front. That's not what they're dealing with. The plan is how to rig the elections. Now, the Secretary of State, Pompeo, said that observers has to be allowed to observe the elections. Mm-hmm. Which observers are going to stay there for 5 months in Guyana? Apart from the COVID, which set of observers can stay or have ever stayed in any country for 5 months to observe an election? Mm-hmm. What is Guyana? And the other point is that these people are not going to get money from oil. And this is very important. So you know who they have to depend on now? The Guyanese private sector, the Guyanese farmers, and the Guyanese workers. I have not heard in all of this any plan, an immediate plan to respond on how to help the workers, how to help the farmers. You are not going to get oil money. You can't export bauxite. Even the gold would be under stress. So our people have to save Guyana. Only the Guyanese people can save Guyana now. And that is what has to happen. They have to respond. But I told you, these people have no empathy with workers or farmers. I'll make another point. I know the grassroots well. I spent over a decade in the grassroots. And I've been going over the last 3 years. I go to All Boys Town. I go to Rumvelt. I go to La Penitence and Tiger Bay. Go behind the front and you will see that how many people live in a house that is not a house. How many people have outdoor toilet? How many people do not have water? How are those people going to survive? Even if these people take a racist position, have they responded to the poor Afro-Guyanese? Even if they do that, where have they been there? I have not seen any minister of the government go to these poor areas and comfort the people. The people of Guyana need as much hope. They are in a state of fear. And it's worse when a stupid minister says that she has to decide which Guyanese live and which Guyanese die.
Schumann, we've had a history, or our recent history on math has been very confusing, as you can tell, right? And now we've got these new numbers of 155 days to count 2,000 plus boxes. What's your reaction? You're on the ground. I know you're probably at the site where you're protecting or observing the safety of the boxes. What's your reaction to these strange numbers?
Salem, the internet on my side is a little bit what I say, unsure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. You're just
okay. So the video is paused, but at least the sound is going through, right?
Absolutely,
I want to touch on something.
Don't worry about it.
I want to touch on something that you brought up earlier, right? People don't understand the domino effect to an economy when you start putting measures in place. Take, for example, if you cut off the VAT on water and electricity, which we clearly support, if you start giving tax exemptions, remember your tax base no longer exists in a pandemic in this sense. It would have a very, very serious impact on your ability to cope at any economic downturn. You don't have a contingency fund, you don't have a lot of things, so it is obviously going to impact the country's ability to manage any economic crisis. So I would tell you this much, that the worst times are not behind us by any means. It is still ahead of us. And this pandemic is only but one small part of it. It's a big thing, but it is, relatively speaking, it is small compared to what is ahead of us. But this issue of 156 days to count 2,339 boxes, I don't know if Paul could bring his uncle back and have them committed to his uncle to be treated, because that is absolute insanity. Mr. Lowenfield would have worked at the Guyana Elections Commission for over a decade. And you're telling me that he has not been able to put together a plan and contingencies in that entire decade? It is absolutely ludicrous on the side of insanity to think that this is possible and that we can go through and accept that. We have a plan that could see all of these ballots completed in a week. There are 10 regions, there are 10 returning officers, there are 10 presiding officers, actually more than that presiding officers. The only issue that we have is with Clermont Mingo and Ms. Myers. Those are the two people that really stood to undermine what we have tried to do in Guyana. But if you're to bring back these people and you say, look, you're responsible for your region, when you're done with that, come and let us know, and then we're going to move you on to something else. Within 1 week, we could have all of these votes counted. We could have everything done. So that the country within 1 week.
Why a week? Why not 1 day or 2 days? When the original results came out, it took one night for each region to send their
yes,
report.
But
then
you have to remember that there are 2,339 polling stations. So you would need 2,339 people, presiding officers or such, from the Guyana Elections Commission to come and do this work. To transport all of those people into Georgetown right now might take a lot longer. But if you give 1 week, and I'm saying this realistically, if you give 1 week, you bring all of these people into Georgetown where the boxes are, you obviously segment these boxes so that regions 1 and 2 could be counted in one place, regions 2 and 3, 4, well, 4 would be separate because we need all eyes on region 4 in my view, but the rest of them, and if you put them in such a manner, within 1 week, these ballots would be completely counted, completely counted. Once again, it borders on the line of insanity to think that you're going to require 156 days after you've been at the Elections Commission for over a decade just to count, what, 2,339 boxes?
Yeah.
That is insanity.
Saladin, all they have to do to bring this thing to a closure is to recount the votes of Region 4.
Absolutely.
That is all they have to do. This is pussyfooting. That is all they have to do. And this thing could be over with. Look, the PNC was in power from 1968 to 1992 with fraudulent election. You know what Burnham said once? To the people of Linden, Afro-Guyanese. In 1985, when I contested the election, I had 33 polling agents and 19 candidates in Linden. I had a base in Linden. You know what he went to Linden and told the Afro-Guyanese? He said, I don't need your votes. I win election with my brains. So these Burnhamites, a small group of diehard Burnhamites, have seized the PNC. They are not the part of the tradition of the other political leaders of the PNC. And they do not intend to have any votes counted properly. They are buying time to do something fraudulent with the election. This is evident. Now, the other point is that the way they are processing the elections, in 1978, Burnham was supposed to have elections. He didn't. He organized a referendum, the House and the Mouse, to impose on Guyanese people a constitution that gave him the powers of Caesar, the powers of Pharaoh, a constitution that unto today the Guyanese people are a victim of. He postponed that election to 2 years, to 1980. In 1990, Hoyt produced a list that had 100,000 people not on the list. All of us born in December were out. Myself, Joseph Eliezer, and Claudius London burnt that list in front of GCOM. Then we had to negotiate with Jimmy Carter, who came as a mediator. God bless his soul. And Hoyt was able, because of the concessions we had to make, he got 2 extra years. These people have already got 1 year. Now they want another year. It is a practice within the PNC. It's a culture. Something is wrong with that PNC. Something is really wrong. Look, the PPP, with all the criticisms you could have, when they won the election in 2015, there was no hesitation of handing over the power. I thought that was the most beautiful moment in Guyanese history, where we could have, like Trinidad and Tobago, one political party, even though hegemonically ruled by an ethnic group, were willing peacefully to exchange and change power. And I'm going to make another point. The debate in Guyana by some of these Burnhamites is that Guyana is a discussion between Indians and African domination. A significant percentage of the people of Guyana are Amerindian Guyanese and mixed Guyanese. Why are they doing that? All Guyana belongs to all Guyanese. And I cannot understand how the newspaper give these people, one guy said we should squash the elections. Look, our people fought in conquest, slavery, indentureship, 20th century colonialism, for universal human rights. Imagine that under the white man, under the British, we were able to win the right to elect and recall a government of our people's choice in a peaceful, fair election. Under the white man, and our own people are taking it away from us. Our own people.
Mr.
Salim, there's this thing about history, right?
Go
That
ahead.
when I said we're poor students of history, we most definitely are as a nation. When you think of what Mr. Granger is doing, just think back to the likes of coffee. When coffee won the revolution, or well, seemingly won the revolution, and then he went and simply took up his master's position and wore his master's clothes and continued to or wanted to operate like he was in that position as a master in itself. Think of what Mr. Granger would have done. It is the same thing. Poor students of history. And I think Mr. Granger, being a member of academia, should have recognized this, should have been a good student of history and say, look, we should learn from history. We cannot see another coffee, not in 2020. And we need to understand that we need to govern for the people, which is what they have not done. And they show an absolute unwillingness to govern for the people. The people would have made their choice. They would have elected a government. It is, I think it is by majority opinion right now. We can't say statistically, but by opinion, the very fact that they are absolutely unwilling to go to those ballot boxes is a clear demonstration that they would have lost these elections and are unwilling to cede power. There could be no other explanation.
All right. With that, I just want Dr. Tennessee, we have to take a quick commercial break.
Okay.
We'll take a quick commercial break. And in fact, I wanted you to come on. I have a very specific question for you. So Devin, the ads, please.
Attention fellow Guyanese. No need to go into person anymore to book your flight. Book your flight over the phone with a Travelspan GT agent. Once you finish booking over the phone, our agent will give you a payment center close to your home. That's right, no hassle for travel anymore. Travelspan is making it convenient and easier for you to book your flights. No need to travel to the office. Call Travelspan GT today for low fares. Call 227-1701. That's 227-1701. Or in Berbice, call Rose Hall at 337-4287. Travelspan making it easier. So call 227-1701. That's 227-1701. Or Rose Hall at 337-4287. You are now able to work from home or from anywhere with a cloud computer. No more worrying if you can't get to the office. Access all of your files and work in an efficient manner with a cloud computer. Best of all, no waiting for a technician to show up to fix all of your computer crashes or viruses, or any computer problem. No more worrying about power surge or losing your files. Let Globespan set up a cloud computer for you to work from home or anywhere. Access with a laptop, iPad, or any device that you may have. You could set up your own passwords and keep all your information hidden. Globespan will set up all the antivirus programs, automatic backups, and configure a computer to fit your needs. Globespan has technicians in the US and Guyana to assist you. Call Globespan today. In Georgetown, call 225-9054. In West Coast, call 269-0141. Or in the United States, call 718-551-3290.
Well, congrats to Travelspan and Globespan for continuously innovating and adapting to the market. As you can see, they're providing Guyanese in and outside of Guyana services that would make living better in the post-pandemic era. Now, I want to get back to you, Dr. Tennessee. You were at the front line against the dictatorship in the 80s, early 90s, and so on. How much of what you are seeing today resembles, smells like, walks like what you have experienced in the 80s?
It's a repeat of history. It's incredible. But everything they're doing at the level of the election commission, the chair of the election commission is behaving like bullers, and she should be placed with bullers in the hall of shame. She is the chair of the election commission, and it was very interesting that the Secretary of State Pompeo mentioned nothing about the government. He spoke only about the courts and GCOM. He's holding them responsible. And this brings me to another very important point. I am shocked that Moses Nagamutu and others are attacking international solidarity for verifiable, free, and fair elections in Guyana when Moses was a forefront leader in the PPP and was part of the Patriotic Coalition for Democracy and was at all the meetings with Gail Teixeira and myself and others and Rupert Rupnarine and these folks fighting for free and fair elections. And let me make this clear. I am a nationalist, I'm a Democrat, and I'm anti-racist. And I will never, ever support international intervention in my country that removes our sovereignty. But sovereignty is not sovereignty of a few Burnhamites. I have read no book that defines sovereignty as such. Sovereignty resides in the people of Guyana, the will of the people of Guyana. And if the will of the people of Guyana is being undermined and violated, then Guyanese have the right to seek globally international solidarity. When we were in conquest, we got solidarity. Amerindians got solidarity. In slavery, there was anti-slave societies around the world. In indentureship, when Gandhi returned from South Africa and went to India, he lobbied Congress Party to stop indentureship. Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow, one of my heroes, since in 1919, went all over the world to England and the Caribbean and advocated for people to have a living wage, to have democratic trade unionism, and to have the right to vote. When in 1953, the British invaded and suspended our constitution, I was living in James Street, All Boys Town, 6 years old. My father was in the independence struggle, and the British invaded our shop because Dr. Lachman Singh, a prominent leader of the PPP, of the nationalist movement, was upstairs. And they took us to a street in order to check for subversive literature. When the British invaded, Mr. Burnham and Mr. Jagan took a plane and they went all the way to India to ask for international solidarity against British invasion and British imperialism. And there is no time in the history of Guyana. I went all over the world. I went to America, Canada, every country in Latin America and the Caribbean, in Italy, in Germany, in France, in Ireland and Britain to lobby for free and fair elections. I was not lobbying to overthrow a government. I was not lobbying to subvert democracy. So those who are saying now that we do not have the right as a sovereign people to seek the solidarity of the international community. There is an international community that supports human rights, support freedom rights and civil rights. I teach black politics here in America. I wrote the history of a black labor movement. The quest for freedom, universal freedom, has always been on the agenda of African Americans and people of African descent all over the world. All over the world. So these people are inventing a lot of excuses and artificial arguments to justify the seizure of power by a small group of Burnhamites.
Yeah, and just for
Salim, let me jump in there. I want to touch on something that I want to touch on something that Professor brought up there, right? About the sovereignty of this country. I think Moses Nagamutu went on his press conference and said that we cannot permit the sovereignty of Guyana to be undermined by foreign forces. But right now, the sovereignty of Guyana is not being undermined by foreign forces. It is being supported. When you look at what the ABCE, India, and all of the other states would have said, is that all they want is free and transparent elections with legitimate results. The people that are undermining the sovereignty in Guyana are the people who are denying the people their franchise. If you look at what Article 9 of the Constitution says, it says that sovereignty belongs to the people and they exercise that through their elected representatives. Now, if we are electing a government and that is being undermined by a cabal in this sense, then who is it that is really undermining the sovereignty or denying the people their sovereign right in this sense. It is not the international partners. I think there is a disconnect, and I feel so disgusted to watch Mr. Ramjatan, Mr. Nagamutu, and Trotman and the likes, even Mr. Rupnarayan. People, I saw a picture at Paul, Tennessee, Leland, and all those guys back in the day. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Walter Rodney was in that picture too. When they were fighting for free and democratic elections in Guyana. And I find it very, very disheartening, and it is a travesty to the name of Dr. Walter Rodney that Desmond Trotman is sitting on a board and denying the people the same thing that their founder leader died for, got assassinated for. When you watch at one of the speeches that Nagamutu and Ramjatan made, when they accused so vehemently and they accused the APNU of being just the PNC and that they're going to rig the elections and came out fighting. That is how they got a little bit of votes in 2011 and in 2015. But now they are part of that rigging machine. I find once again that we are very poor students in terms of history. If you are on the ground and you see what's happening, some of even the most reasoned people in themselves are digging themselves into trenches. I don't know why they're doing that. I quite support Paul's position that in 2015 the peaceful transition of government was very important, but the country is not going to move forward if we continue to conduct ourselves in this manner. If you look at what Ambassador Lynch had said, Paul, let me finish, please.
Yeah.
What Ambassador Lynch said, it is not that we are interfering, it is called diplomacy, and we have a right to support democratic processes across, at least with all of our partners. Look at what happened in Texas today, right? Someone was accused of electoral fraud. The police went in and investigated, and the person is being charged. So far, we are 35 days into elections. There has been accusations of electoral fraud, but the police in themselves have not intervened or undertaken any investigation at this point. I don't understand where these institutions that were meant to safeguard our democracy now becomes hijacked, and they become part of a party tool in that sense. They're not being used to support the country or to support democracy. They're being used to repress people and repress democracy in this country. And I think we're treading on a very, very tight rope right now. You see, if we're to permit this to continue, Salim, the top generals in the military will be sanctioned, the top tier in the police will be sanctioned, the members of this cabal will be sanctioned. But that undermines the security of this nation, because it means that our military will not be seen with the same degree of credibility. When we ask for help, nations are going to sit there and say, well, who is it that we're helping? Are we helping the military, or are we helping the country? Are we helping a cabal? They will not be able to go and receive bilateral training in this sense, joint training with other forces. They would not be able to go to various universities to study in military tactics and all of these things. So I don't know if they understand the gravity of what is going on in Guyana. The fact that we cannot have access to finances in this country, it is but one component. Believe me, when it comes down, it will most definitely be the sword of Damocles that is going to come down on this nation. And it is going to tear such a big rip in this country that we are going to struggle for a long time to get this country back together. And right now, we're just feeling the tip of that sword.
Absolutely.
I want to make two quick points. One is the ambassador of America made a very important point. Guyana government supported in the OAS, the Lima group, isolating Venezuela and asking for verifiable, free and fair elections, and implicitly supporting Guaido. Number two, UC Guyana, myself, Dr. Chedi Jagan went on a tour in the Caribbean, and we lobbied Caribbean governments for free and fair elections. Dr. Jagan, UC Guyana, and I were in Barbados at a hearing of U.S. congressmen in which You see, and Dr. Jagan and I presented the case for verifiable, free, and fair election in Guyana. Moses Nagamutu says he's a Jaganite. And this thing about consultancy firm, PNC has had consultancy firms in Washington, D.C. PPP under Jagan had a consultancy firm. Everybody has it. There is nothing wrong with that. If it's a consultancy firm to push drugs or to traffic arms or human trafficking, yes, that is terrible. Yes, that is a criminal act, but not for human rights, not for civil rights, not for verifiable, free and fair elections.
It seems like we lost Schumann, but I guess he'll be back in soon. But I just want to give full disclosure that Schumann and yourself, Dr. Tennessee, or myself, neither of us are PPP. We're not candidates of the PPP. We're not advocates of the PPP. I think we're all advocates of democracy and the rule of law. I myself have been the campaign manager for Change Guyana, for which I was contracted to do professionally. I am a marketing, I am a campaign, I understand Guyanese politics and culture. And when Change Guyana was looking for someone to put the pieces together for a project that's called Change Guyana Campaign, they hired me. So I'm not a PPP. I'm not a PNC for sure, and I'm not. I'm just here ensuring that what's best for Guyana is provided in the fairest manner. With that,
I think on that point, everybody knows in and out Guyana that I'm a very independent thinking person, and that I belong to the Reimann Institute, which is a think tank. We're working on policies, and that we have put out a statement very clearly linking the call for recounting the votes in Region 4, but at the same time, we are asking that whoever is elected into government in a verifiable election should convoke a table of patriotic governance and convoke civil society and all the political parties to discuss seriously an agenda that they will implement some very important implementations within 100 days on the issue of racial equality and racial justice, on the issue of the coronavirus, and on the issue of the democratization of Guyana. Yeah. We are very clear about this, that we need ethical and transformational leadership, and we need to engage in the structural transformation of Guyana. So we are nationalists, we are Democrats,
absolutely,
we are anti-racist.
But if you don't have
call people out if they violate the vital interests of Guyana, because we are nationalists, we're Democrats, we are anti-racist.
Well, I wanted to switch the conversation a little bit. I mean, one of APNU's member party, the WPA, which for many, many years represented a multi-ethnic, multi-class approach towards fixing Guyana's many issues, and is now sadly part of the APNU. One of its spokesmen, Mr. David Hines, Dr. David Hines, he mentioned about burning the ballot boxes, which I'm sure he doesn't mean literally, but even figuratively, it's dangerous, and talks about an interim government headed by Granger. Now, I know he haven't said this in quite a while. Suddenly it dawned on him that we need an interim government and we don't need elections and all that kind of stuff. What is your reaction to someone who's supposed to be representing the legacy of someone like Walter Rodney, who would have been vehemently opposed to what's happening in Guyana today?
Well, Walter Rodney gave his life for Guyana, a true patriot, and evidently that was not the position of Walter Rodney when he was struggling. Now, I think David, I know David a long time. We struggled in the PCD. We were on the march from Buxton to Kitty. I lived in Annandale South. He lived in Buxton. I like David personally at a personal level, but I cannot understand what has happened to David. How can he say that you squash an election where our people went and vote peacefully? I cannot understand how he wants to be part of a coup in Guyana. I cannot understand. So I believe that what David has said will make him now not the person to carry the baton of Walter Rodney. It definitely not. He's carrying the baton of Burnham. And this is sad. And it is equal that Moses Nagamutu is now carrying the baton of Burnham. It is incredible that that guy who was in the bosom of the PPP used to try to break up my meeting, that he's a Marxist, Leninist, and fighting anti-imperialism. That guy today with David are now together, as Burnhamites. I cannot understand it.
Yeah, Dr. Tennessee, why would someone like David, who had represented a true struggle of Guyana, would change so drastically over the past few months? What would have triggered?
Because David, some people, when they are faced with very difficult ethnic questions, they lose sight of the bigger picture. They see the tree and not the forest. Let me give you an example. When I was fighting, I had options. But anybody knew that if we were to take the path of violence, that it would have ended up in ethnic violence and not a violence of a national patriotic struggle. It would have degenerated. So it was very tempting. All the time it's very tempting. But you have to have a strong understanding of Guyanese history and Guyanese people as a totality and not just as a group. You have to understand history holistically in Guyana. That's where I get my inspiration. I don't get my inspiration from Europe or the history of America. I get it from the Guyanese people. So that is fundamentally the problem.
I think
it's an emotional, temporal action, but
I think
it's
we have
dangerous.
I
want to jump in there for a bit.
Dr. Tennessee is responding to the statement by WPA.
I got that.
Yes, so if you can respond to that, we'll be glad to hear from you.
Look, the reason why David Hines is now championing the cause of shared governance and all of these things, it is because his party lost. There is no other reason. Where was this talk about shared governance pre-election? Where was this talk of shared governance? And tell me this, if the APNU-AFC would have won these elections, do you think that Dr. David Hines would be coming out talking about shared governance? Absolutely not. The only reason why he's talking about that right now, it is because the party that he supported has lost these elections clearly, and simply put, they want to find a way to get a foot back into the door with the PNC. The WPA is inseparable from the PNC, put it that way, very, very clearly. There's no question about it. The WPA is only WPA because of history and how history would have recorded it, but there's no such thing as a WPA
But
anymore.
Shuman, it's not shared governance, it's hegemonic governance, because he said Granger has to be the president. That is hegemony. And he wants to reduce the PPP and the other political parties, because we don't know if you guys want a seat. He wants to reduce you all to the role of the AFC. When they say jump your ass how high, that is hegemony. That's not shared governance. What we need in Guyana is inclusivity. Bottom up.
But coming back to the discussion of shared or interim or better governance or whatever, you talked about the PCD, you talked about the Guard movement, you talked about so many other movements in the past that was taught, and even Rodney would have spoken about, a shared sort of approach to governing Guyana. Is shared governance fundamentally a discussion that we should have in Guyana at this stage of our game?
Not by the definition of David Hines.
Paul, let me take this for a sec, right? I think I disagree with that premise right now, Salim. Guyana is not at a point of shared governance yet. I think what we may have to start approaching is a world governance body in that sense, and we're far away from that. But I say that because if we were to go to shared governance, think of what happens in China. Basically, there's no check. There's no yin to the yang, right? There's no one to check a political party. So basically, imagine if you were to get these people who are so corrupt right now in league with the corrupt people from the PPP, and they decided they want to take Guyana. Who now is left to look out for the needs of the people? You're not electing Mother Teresa, the Pope, and the Dalai Lama, right? You're electing human beings who would have found a way to do things financially and with the country that they wanted to do. So there's no formula right now in this country for shared governance. If you look at what is going to happen at the ministerial level, ministries would tend to underperform just to make the main administration look bad and vice versa. What you're looking for, what you're hoping for, is inter-administrative cooperation or inter-ministry cooperation in that sense. But if you're to get into this political fray right now, where we are in this country, there is no formula of shared governance that is going to work because we are, as a people, are not there yet.
Well, Schumann, let me make this point.
We have to get some of the fundamentals.
It's not shared governance, Schumann. It's shared dictatorship. Schumann,
right. So
it's not shared governance, according to David Hines. It's shared dictatorship.
I get you.
You're squashing an election, and you are saying that David Hines appoint Granger president and if Dr. Irfan Ali as prime minister. That is shared governance?
It's not.
I get you, Paul. But here's the thing. We have some other fundamental questions that we have not dealt with in this country as yet. We continue to walk around with the burdens of history on our shoulders, and every time someone raises their head to bring an issue to the fore, we take that history and swing it and lash them with it. Instead of saying, look, we recognize that we would have erred historically, we recognize that there are a lot of things that would have been wrong, but let's find a way to correct it and move on. But every time you talk, let's say, for example, we're talking about rigging elections and what would have happened, the first thing that's going to come up and say, look, man, y'all did this so and so time, right? You talk about corrupt ministers right now. No, that was corrupt and nothing happened. Where were you then? Well, guess what? I was an infant then. How could I solve anything? I was a minor then. How could I solve anything? People don't understand some of these things. You can't take history and use it as a whip for people who disagree with you. You have to use history and learn from it so that you don't repeat it. And we have not solved some of those fundamental issues.
And I think
the population of the public service sector, for example. We have not permitted diversity to infiltrate any of those institutions. When you look at indigenous peoples, they're underrepresented in every single ministry. When I walked into the court for all the times that I have been in court, the only people that you see in court are Indians and blacks. What happened to the indigenous peoples? What happened to the Portuguese? What happened to the Chinese? What happened to all these other ethnicities?
Exactly.
Are they not part of the structure? So basically, we have not solved what I'd say some of the fundamental issues in this country. So to have a dialogue about shared governance right now, I think that is jumping too far ahead.
I think one of the
shared governance is something that we have to look at some 20 years down the road.
I think one of the flaws of those who are advocating shared governance is their inability to clearly define what it is. I myself are not clear about it, and I'm sure most Guyanese, or even those who are advocating for it, they're not sure what it is. So I think that's one issue. So I want to ask you guys, if not this amorphous shared governance, how do we move out? How do we move from first base? In fact, we're probably in the dugout still. We're not even in first base yet. How do we get out of the dugout section of where we are right now?
We have to deal with racial justice and racial equality. We have to deal with it as a priority. We have to deal with it, and that's why we have advocated a table of patriotic governance so that we could convoke the Guyanese society to discuss openly the issue and to work out concrete strategies and plans and budgets on how to deal with it. Number two, do not call it shared governance. What David Hines has advocated has nothing to do with the word shared. It is shared dictatorship, not governance. Shared dictatorship. When we were approaching 1985 elections, I had word that there might have been a
Taliban's
coalition
got to get back on
to the
video.
election between
Great,
Dr.
thanks.
Jagan and Burnham. And I issued a public telegram telling Dr. Jagan not to do that, that he has to give priority to verifiable, free and fair elections. I say the same thing today. We cannot speak of anything else now at this conjuncture than verifiable, free and fair election. If Mr. Granger wins, we salute him. If Dr. Irfan Ali wins, we salute him. Saluddin, how many minutes are left?
We get some time, but right now we'll take a commercial break. Devin,
Okay.
I think you've
Because
got
I have a joke for you before we leave. Because I have a great
Did you know the FBI warned against using public Wi-Fi? And hackers using public Wi-Fi can download viruses and steal all of your private information. Let Globespan help you protect against hackers by providing you with a virtual private network or VPN. Keep all of your data hidden and protected, including sensitive information, documents, bank account numbers, and more. The FBI recommends using a VPN, and Globespan can help provide one for you. It's very simple and easy to use. Call Globespan today. In Georgetown, call 225-9054. In West Coast, call 269-0141. Or in the United States, call 718-551-3290. January marks 1 year since Globespan 24x7 embarked on this initiative to offer a platform that brings in all sides, all points of view, and all concerns. Viewers in Guyana and across the world are participating in discussions that are bringing to light issues relating to social, economic, and political matters that have been plaguing our nation. Globespan's platform offers Guyanese to express their concerns and discuss solutions in the political realm, thereby addressing the polarized situation. Discussions also include social ills such as alcoholism, domestic violence, and suicides that have been plaguing the people. The platform also mitigates the brain drain by having speakers that live in Guyana and across the world participate in these discussions. This concept will avail a broader view for the benefit of all Guyanese, so Globespan needs your support to offset the expenses. Kindly contribute by clicking the link in the description to help support these programs.
Well, thank you, Devin. For those,
Salim, I want to get first go at this.
Yes. So we were talking about the concept of shared governance, or how do we move from where we are today?
Dictatorship, not shared governance.
Shuman, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I wanted to touch on something because I look at how ridiculous things are getting in Guyana right now, right? When the Canadian High Commissioner, when the American ambassadors, when the UK ambassador, the High Commissioner, when they came out and said things that clearly stood in the way of the rigging process, the APNUAFC and their machinery came out and started to attack these people. Now that they have committed, now that the courts have said that GCOM can undertake the recount, look at the words that they're walking back on. They're walking back on those very same words to say, look, when they asked for these things, this is what they meant. Now, I don't understand if these people attended school to learn Diplomacy 101. God knows I did not. But at least I learned it through having flown for 20 years in the airline industry. To get to that point of shared governance, if we are to go to that point, right? And Paul is quite right. It would not be shared governance. It would be shared dictatorship, because what is going to happen is you are going to have this hegemonic rule of Guyana. It would not be governance by any means. It would be rulership, hegemonic rulership of this country. And we have to be careful about how we approach that. Guyana is not at that point as yet to approach anything that resembles shared governance. You could pick some of the best formulas in this world. There are some fundamental needs on Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we as a people have not met as yet. And as long as those needs continue to exist, we are not going to get to a shared governance formula that works for this country.
Yes, so Mr. Dr. Tennessee, you wanted to chime in on that same subject also.
Yes, I want us not to repeat. That's the thing about propaganda. David spoke about shared governance. There's nothing there about sharing governance. It's shared dictatorship. Because Mr. Granger was not elected by the people of Guyana in the current election to be the president of Guyana. Dr. Irfan Ali was not elected in the current election to be the prime minister of Guyana. So who in the name of God have appointed these two men that they have to be in a government, one with this position and one with the other? It is not currently what should be on the agenda is a verifiable, free, and fair elections. We are getting distracted. But lo and behold, you have to be an ostrich with your head under the sand if you do not recognize that from this election that there are people genuinely with fears about ethnic hegemony, and that we have to deal with the ethnic problem in Guyana. But now the ethnic problem is not only between African and Indian, because we have about 30 or 25% of the population that are not Indian and African. We have Portuguese now in Guyana. We have Spaniards now in Guyana, that the APNU advertise meeting in Portuguese and Spanish. So what are they talking about? So what we have proposed is a table of patriotic governance, where we take care of our people. It has to be governance top up, top down. We have to change the constitution. You never will get an ideal form of shared governance, even if I were to sit down and prepare a shared governance methodology and strategy. It cannot be implemented with the current constitution.
I know we're talking about the next big thing for Guyana is the recount. And with the recount, you'll have a declaration. Correct. I want to ask you guys frankly, both of you, do you believe either side is ready to accept the result of a verified count and declaration?
I think if it's free and fair, and it's verifiable as it was verified, and Schuman was there. He is more qualified to speak of whether that election was free and fair. Everybody said it was free and fair until
the election was free and fair, but the counting is where the
it's Region 4, brother. It's Region 4, brother. It's Region 4, brother. It's Region 4. Don't forget that. These people are good at manipulating the minds of people. It's Region 4, Region 4, Region 4. Let's not forget that. And let them count that honestly in front of CARICOM, in front of the Commonwealth Secretariat, in front of the ambassadors of the US, Canada, all the Western countries and others, Carter Center, the political parties.
And as Schuman suggested, in front of the world, live.
Yeah.
One of the things, a few things that we are contemplating, and I'm hopeful that we could get some movement on it. Whether or not the Guyana Elections Commission chooses to look at the other 9 stakeholders in this political cycle, it is yet to be seen. But I think one of the ways to settle a lot of these discrepancies is to take the ballot boxes, since CARICOM is coming here to validate, not to supervise, not to interfere, not to oversee. They're coming here as as Vincent Alexander and some others put it, to validate the results from these elections. Let us just take all of these containers containing the ballot boxes, take them to the CARICOM Secretariat, where we could go through that count in the CARICOM Secretariat. We don't have to rely on the auspices of the police or any other infiltrator in that sense to go and look at the ballot boxes. It would be protected by that diplomatic ring that exists within the CARICOM Secretariat to do the count. I think when we get to that point and we go through this process, whatever the outcome is, I think it would be hard pressed on any political party not to accept the outcome. But I want to draw attention to what Freddie said today in his column, that it is the deep state of the PNC that is operating. When we look at what is happening in this sense, right, they seem to want to take everything and compound it. Take, for example, Vincent Alexander's remarks about not just because, you know, the numbers say one thing that is going to be the results of the elections. Well, what else could it be? Why are we going through a counting process if it is not to verify who the victors and the victims are in these elections? And I hope that there are no victims, but that the entire of Guyana comes out of this process as the victor. There's no other way to look at it. Now, when Vincent Alexander utters those words, it is quite disturbing because it offers a little bit of insight as to what their next moves are. They're not interested in having a recount that is verifiable, that has the integrity and the legitimacy of not only Guyana, but the international community. They are interested in results that will show, regardless of how they achieve it, that the APNU-AFC would have won these elections. Now, if they would have taken this long to get to that point, is there any sane person in Guyana, that can say with absolute certainty that the APNU-AFC would have won these elections? I will tell you no.
A very good point.
No, there's also
their own legitimacy, even
right.
if
There's
you
also
win the election.
There's also one more thing that I want to touch on. Right, we have struggled roughly 20 plus days to get to this point of a recount. And now you see the likes of some of these PNC stalwarts, trolls, and everyone else who is now asking, instead of a recount, they want an elections audit. Well, guess what? The court of Guyana, not only the full court, but the appeals court, said that any matter that relates to elections is within the remit of GCOM to determine. When the results are declared, you have to take it to an elections petition. So I don't know where these guys are getting to a full audit of the Guyana Elections Commission. Where were those cries long before we got into this process? Where were those cries when Patterson and himself was selected against the Constitution to lead the Elections Commission? None of those things were there. All of a sudden, you would have lost the elections, and then you want to induce and introduce a variety of things that are irrelevant to rile up people and drive this country down the path of civil war. There could be no other explanation. It is very irresponsible of people to take such approach.
Two quick points. Number one, the next step the PNC will introduce when they get frustrated with 158 days is they're going to call for a new election. That's the next step. Number two, Vincent Alexander ran 2 times to be leader of the PNC. He's using GCOM to create a national following in the grassroots of the PNC for his aspiration to be the leader of the PNC. And they have various factions. They have the Greenwich faction. They have the Reimann faction. The Attorney General is very silent. Have you heard the Attorney General speak in public recently? I don't know what has happened to him. And Valda Lawrence is the chairman of PNC group in Georgetown. Before then, it was this guy from the professor from the GCOM. He is campaigning to become the leader of the PNC. He is not campaigning for verifiable, free and fair elections. You have to see this thing through. You have to understand how the PNC works and the politics of Guyana. This is a campaign, and Nagamutu is campaigning for a position after the elections because Kemraj has cut him off. This
So
is
again,
about personal interest.
yeah, Dr. Tennessee, we are almost up. The times is
My
up.
joke.
You
My
also
joke.
joke. You also joke. But before we get to your joke, I want to ask Schumann again, because I didn't hear his answer. And you're on the ground and you're interacting every day with all sides. Is either side, and one of them are going to win after a recount, the APNU or the PPP, are either of these sides willing to accept the final declaration after a recount?
No, correction, Salim. Let me mention this to you. Right, there are people from the APNUAFC PNC who, on the ground, are in tears right now because when they voted for the APNUAFC, they were not expecting this. And they look back at the clock and they say, you know what, if I can only walk back in time, I would vote differently because this is not what they signed on for. They are hurting, they look at what's happening. And I will tell you that the APNU AFC, or whoever you want to call it, PNC, they would have lost a lot of supporters in what they are trying to do. If you look at what they have done, they have literally shrunk their base. They have not grown it, they have shrunk that base. So, what will happen is, however these results come out, I will tell you this much, that once it has the transparency, once it has the legitimacy, and once the parties that are involved are content, I can't say that everyone will be, but once you've got that legitimate and transparent component in it, or components, the people will accept it, and both parties will have no choice but to accept it. But with the absence of transparency and legitimacy, you are going to have problems in this country. And I don't know if there's a delicate way to put this, but if we permit this to happen, right now, today I read that the previous declarations stand until such time as there is one to replace it. If they attempt to circumvent this process or bypass this process to get to some fraudulent declaration again, I will tell you in no uncertain terms that this country called Guyana is on the cusp of civil war, and we have to understand that.
Well, that's an unfortunate place where we would want to be. But on the positive side, I do hear your comment about many Guyanese who voted are still awaiting for that their democratic responsibility to be counted. With that, I want to ask our good doctor here to give us his closing remark and, of course, his joke.
Well, I want to tell you this. You keep calling me doctor, right? I have 2 masters, and I got completed all the courses for the doctorate at York University, but then I went back to Guyana, got involved because I was fired at the University of Guyana in 3 weeks, and I stayed on and fought the dictatorship until we had free and fair elections. So in 1985, the PNC only gave me 2 minutes on the radio. So when I was being introduced by Clem David, he says, I now introduce Dr. Paul Nehru Tennessee, presidential candidate of the Democratic Labor Movement. I says, sir, I am not a doctor. He says, it doesn't matter. You always sung like a doctor. And that was on national radio.
Okay, great.
You know, Guyanese like to have a laugh. When I write my book, Clem David will have a special place in that.
Gotcha.
Salim, before we wrap up, I'd like to say a few words, right?
Sure. Go ahead.
I want to thank all of the frontline workers, all of the people who are putting their lives at risk every day to ensure that we are combating the COVID-19 pandemic. The nurses, the CHWs, the doctors, the lab technicians, and all of them who are in Guyana, who are doing a tremendous amount of work. In some cases, they're going without sleep. They're not provided the kind of support in terms of transportation, finances, or anything else that supports their work, but yet they're going there and doing it selflessly every day. And I want to commend their hard work and thank them so much. The country Despite the political turmoil in Guyana, the country right now, the health of the nation lies in the hands of those people, and I want to thank them for the work that they're doing, not only in Guyana, but globally.
I'd like to
Absolutely.
endorse what Schumann said, and I'd like to add to our people, be strong, do not be afraid, try and have courage, and do not be discouraged, and keep hope alive. We have to persist, and we have to overcome what is going to face us. So I
And
wish all Guyanese the best, as we are here too in a similar boat. You know, I say that every morning each of us wake up. I never could have imagined that this would have happened. Whether we're in the Congo or we're in India, whether we're in Russia or Chile, we all ask two questions. Am I going to contract the coronavirus today? Will I die today? It's a frightening thing, but this is planetary. This is all over the world. So, Guyanese, like everybody everywhere, we have a common challenge to fight fear, to have courage, and to be strong.
yeah. We also want to send special thanks to the many farmers in Guyana who continue to toil the earth to ensure that we have food in our plate, not only in Guyana, but around the world. Without farmers, we have no food to eat. And at this stage of our existence around the world, especially in America, I would believe food is the most potent commodity out there. You know, food is all we want in America here today. There's nothing else. You know, you don't want gas. There's nowhere to go. You don't want money. There's nothing to go and buy out there. It's food that we are looking for. So in Guyana, especially the farmers from wherever they are, we want to give special thanks. And with that, I want to say a special good night to all of you. Thank you for spending your last 90 minutes with us as we explored various aspects of Guyana and some of the issues that are impacting our lives and the livelihood of Guyanese. Good night again, and please be observant of the regulations as it relates to COVID. Be safe, protect your neighbors, protect yourselves, and protect your family, and most importantly, protect the future of Guyana through democratic expressions daily. With that, I want to say a good night again to my guests. Good night to all of you, and may God keep us safe and healthy in the coming years.
Good night, Salim. Good night, Paul. And thanks to
night.
Nohar and Globespan.
Thank you.
Take care. God bless.